Do you remember the first time you watched The Simpsons?
I mean, I don't think The Simpsons was really considered one of those like Family Guy or any of those types. It wasn't a bad show, real. I don't think it was anyways. So it's like it wasn't one of those shows like, oh, you can't let your children watch it. I mean, I was probably like, but earlier than 10, I would have to say, but like I wasn't like super young.
It is funny you say that about how it's not a bad show. At the time, like in the 90s, there was a percentage of the population that did view it as a bad show. Even if I remember correctly, I was reading this earlier today, George H. W. Bush, so W. Bush's daddy,
Mm-hmm.
part of his election campaign, or shortly after he was elected, he made a reference to how the American family needs to look less like The Simpsons and more like, I think he said The Waltons, which was another like sitcom with a good, red blood, God-fearing American family on it. But The Simpsons definitely had that mantra there for a little bit because you had Bart, who disobeyed his parents. You had Homer, who was supposed to be the patriarch of the family, but he was a dunce. I mean, think about it. He worked at a nuclear power plant, loved donuts, and was terrible at his job. It was a comedy, like, don't get me wrong, but, and then you had, I guess Lisa was the bright spot in the family, right? Because she was book smart, good at jazz, played the saxophone, things like that.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. So, like, yes, I totally agree with what you said. It's nowhere near like a Family Guy in terms of crudeness, but I mean, when did Family Guy come out? That came out in like the 2000s, right?
Family Guy came out, I think it was like 2000. I think it was like right at 2000.
Okay, so The Simpsons has already been out for like a decade plus at that point. So really, I think The Simpsons were first on the scene with like crude animated sitcom comedy.
So The Simpsons, let's see here.
And I remember not being able to watch it. I wasn't able to watch The Simpsons growing up. My parents did not jive with it.
The only, like, I wouldn't say like my parents like went out of the way to be like, oh, sure. But it was like one of those, like, I couldn't watch it by myself. If that made sense. So it's like, now there were certain shows like obviously Family Guy, like, and then South Park, shows like that. I definitely was not allowed to watch. I couldn't watch Family Guy until I was like 13 or 14 years old. Like, my parents just didn't let me. But realistically, though, I mean, it wasn't. I wasn't mimicking anything from it. It was just a funny show. I'll be honest with you, I don't even watch it now because like I don't understand it. I mean, I'll watch like clips, like on YouTube, like YouTube shorts and stuff like that regarding it, but I don't go out of my way to like watch that kind of stuff. But like for The Simpsons, though, I mean, I got more into The Simpsons because of the fact of it predicted certain things. That obviously, like, there was this huge craze about the writers of The Simpsons were actually time travelers because they knew what was going on, or they had inside information about what was going on. Now, there have been people that have tried to debunk that and say like, oh, if you just pay attention to what's actually going on, The Simpsons actually isn't, they're not portraying what's going on and they're not predicting what's going on, that it's different. But I'm taking it with a grain of salt. I mean, we're talking about this for entertainment purposes. So for anyone out there who's listening, I mean, I don't think we're going to go tinfoil hat, but you never know with us.
Everything we say on this episode is going to be absolute fact. So just trust us, bro. You don't have to fact check any of this. It's going to be good, factual content.
Well, you heard it here first on April 14th, 2024 at 8:25 p.m. that everything we're about to say in this episode is totally 100% factual. Unscripted Company.
Exactly. But yeah, so The Simpsons, I mean, they have over 750 episodes. I was looking up earlier. It's a crazy amount. They almost have 1,000 episodes over like 35 seasons. The wild thing that I didn't realize, because we're about to dive into a lot of the, I guess, like fortune telling elements of The Simpsons and in terms of how accurate, let's say accuracy, how accurate they were able to predict certain scenarios into the future. But what I didn't realize that was kind of interesting was, remember when Disney bought Fox? I had forgotten about that. Do you remember that? Not too many years ago. It was like right before COVID. Fox.
Yeah, it was like 2018. Yeah.
Yeah. So technically, I never made this connection. Disney, the Walt Disney Company, owns The Simpsons. Current day Simpsons is a Walt Disney production.
But it's not as, I don't think it's as bad though, like compared to what it was 30 years ago.
Well,
Like,
even if you would view it as,
wrong.
even if you view it as like bad, not bad. I mean, Disney's put out its own library of questionable content. I mean, if you go back and look at like the Disney cartoons from like the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, kind of sketch, especially the wartime ones. Them and Warner Brothers, they're kind of hilarious to watch. But yeah, they have the closet of skeletons.
Now they're like, oh, we're all holy and we pride ourselves on this, but then you want to fire actors because they come out as certain things or whatever. Anyways, I'm not gonna go on that tangent, but I'm just saying Disney has their moments where they are definitely very much so hypocritical about what they say and what they do. But
yeah, no, you're spot on with that. But let me ask you this: out of all, and we'll go through some examples here in a second, but is there one example, or do you remember what first caught your attention as to The Simpsons predicting the future? And I'm sure you probably heard about a scenario that happened, after the future had occurred. I know I have a few that come to mind for me, but is there one for you that sticks out as like the aha moment?
Honestly, I mean, probably more of the most recent ones, and I could be wrong on the timing, but the COVID one, where they had one about a virus that came out, which, I mean, I'm the same here. It's like I actually have like a list kind of pulled up about like, some of the things that have happened. They actually had one, which I totally didn't even think about this one, but they have one for the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris election. That one came out in 2019. Well, they got elected in 2020. So obviously they predicted they knew what was going to happen before it happened, which, I mean, nobody really could have predicted Biden winning that election, if I'm being honest. I didn't see that coming. I'll be honest. I thought Trump was going to win it again. But again, we're not here to be political. We're just here to talk about things that have happened with it. But yeah, I mean, there's even other episodes that really didn't hit home yet until actually kind of scrolling down, and I was like, oh, that actually happened. Like, this kind of stuff happened well before these events happened. So
yeah, like the one you're talking about with the pandemic. So that season 4, episode 21, back in 1993, the episode was titled Marge in Chains. And basically they had this storyline where you had the Osaka flu that was spreading around, causing a pandemic eerily similar to the COVID-19 pandemic. And then you'd mentioned one other one. I'm going blank on what it was.
The Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Oh, yeah. I saw that one on the list I had. Oh, which one was that, though? That might have been pretty far down.
It was called The West Wing Story. And it was essentially they were taking jabs at Trump. It came out, it was a special short, so I don't think it was like a full-fledged episode, but it was just a short episode. And it came out in 2019 as the election, like, kind of was starting up, like, as to who we saw who was going to be running for president. Another one this one happened way back when, but the Cybertruck.
Yeah.
That one happened in season 2 of episode 15, 1991. The Cybertruck didn't make his debut until, 2017?
Well, yeah, it depends on when you view as the debut. Like, was it the concept car? Was it the production? Like, they actually hit the streets last year for the first time, rolling off the production line. Yeah. The one that I'm surprised you didn't mention it from the get-go was the Trump escalator scene. If you put your hats on and rewind, put your history cap on. Anyways, if you rewind and you think to before Donald Trump declared he was running for president in, was it 2015, 2016? It was the 2016 election. I forget if he declared in like 2015, whenever that was. You had that infamous scene in Trump Tower where he's coming down the golden escalator. Do you remember that scene, like in real life?
I remember the scene, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the moment he announced, like that was his like grand entrance. They had people crowded around him, everything. The Simpsons had that scene of Trump going down an escalator, announcing he was going to run for president, in the year 2000. It was season 11, episode 17, titled Bark to the Future. Conveniently, a play on words of Back to the Future.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but they had that scene. If anyone's listening right now, just Google Trump Simpsons escalator scene, and you'll see it. It's eerily similar. That's the one that I was like, oh, this is... I mean, it could... The thing I have to keep in mind with The Simpsons is, and we'll go down a rabbit hole with this, I think, is it because they have insider knowledge or they have perspective on what's to come that we just don't? Or is it because they just put out so much darn content that they have a couple of hits, but a lot of it is misses,
Or, and this thought actually just hit me, what if just because, let's just say, for sake of argument, that our government is just like, they really think that they're predicting everything. Let's just mimic what the Simpsons are actually doing just to get people to think that this stuff is actually being predicted. Like they know that, like, they're just going off whatever the Simpsons does. So it's like they make an episode, it talks about something with our government or something with our country, and then our government's just like, yeah, we can mimic that, we can do that, and they make it happen themselves.
Potentially. But hang on, I got to put on the glasses for this one. I got my...
All right.
I think it's...
Are we going like full like rabbit hole? Yes, we're going like full rabbit hole then.
Full rabbit hole. What if... This is a big what if. But what if... Let's say the powers that be. I don't know if that means it's a deep state, a 3-letter agency, a single individual. But what if the powers that be use The Simpsons as predictive programming to gauge the interest and plausibility from the general public? Because they know The Simpsons, it's like they broke records. I used to have it up on my screen. I don't think I do anymore. But they broke all these records for not only being like the longest running sitcom, but they also broke the record of being the longest running sitcom in a prime time slot. I forget when they air, but they're always in prime time. Like Fox has never taken them off prime in terms of...
It's usually about 7 or 8 o'clock.
Yeah, it's like the prime time slot. And so, who's not to say that someone pitched an idea of, hey, let's do an episode where Trump declares for presidency, we do this scene, we see how the general public takes to it, and then, I like to think we think long term. I know if you look at the government from the outside looking in, it looks like we don't think long term. It looks like we think to tomorrow or the next budget calamity or, the next government shutdown. We look at that in very short timelines or the next presidency. But who's not to say that, the whole deep state idea comes into play because we assume there's like a group of individuals that are there for a long time. So they're able to think, decades rather than years, which is the whole thing of like what other governments are able to do, especially if you look at like our arch nemesis, the People's Republic of China. They don't have to worry about an election every 4 years, so they can think long term with things. So that's where I forget where I'm going with this, but who's not to say the deep state uses The Simpsons as predictive programming?
I'm just going to say right now, the CIA or the FBI is involved in it. They're part of the produce team. It is what it is. We just have to live with it.
I think it would be... That's the whole thing. I think it would be the CIA. If you had to pin it on one or the other...
That would make more sense.
I don't think the FBI is really worth their salt. I think... they're listening to this right now, probably. They're a bunch of clowns. I'll go on record. I think, as a whole... If you had to put money on one of the 3-letter agencies to really be up to some shenanigans, it's the CIA. Now, we know the FBI gets up to shenanigans because they like to collude. They make things happen that shouldn't be happening. But in terms of like real, under the radar, you'll never see it declassified type things. I think the CIA is going to put your money on. So, what are the odds that... What's his name? Matt Groening? The guy that started The Simpsons.
I think so, yeah.
Do you know does he have any weird anomalies in his life? Did he ever apply to work at the CIA and then got rejected? That happens, People do that.
Let's see
Where's this guy from? We're gonna look up this cat real quick.
What's his last name?
Matt Groening. It's Groening. I don't know if the ing is pronounced the way normally English pronounces it. English is such a complicated language.
So I'm just gonna go on Wikipedia for this, just because it's.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. He also created Futurama, which I think is an excellent program. I don't know if you've ever watched Futurama, but Futurama gets a lot of things right too. Not in the sense of telling the future, but just knowing what the future will look like. I mean, think about Futurama. They predicted the suicide booths before suicide booths were a real thing.
Yeah.
Sure. Bender, the robot in the show, he references it multiple times. I think in the first episode, he walks into one. I think that's how he meets Fry. But now, in certain countries, I know Canada's got it. I think there's some Nordic countries that have it too. You can literally go in a suicide booth. You get not diagnosed. You get not recommended. What's the term? You get, it's not a prescription. Whenever a doctor says you can go to another doctor.
Referral?
A referral. You get a referral to a suicide booth, which is terrifying. But Futurama had that in 99.
I'm not seeing anything on here about, anything. I mean, he literally, all he's done is just comic book stuff, artistry. It says other pursuits, but he publishes comic books based on The Simpsons and Futurama. He formed Bongo Comics, which is named after the character Bongo from Life in Hell. Never really did anything else. Okay. They had 2 sons, so him and his wife actually had 2 sons together. Homer, who goes by Will, so he actually named his son Homer. And they got married in 1986, so keep in mind this is before.
Well, I saw he had named all the Simpsons characters after his own family, except himself, and that's where Bart came from.
Yeah. Let's see here.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything suspicious either, but I just feel like there would be something there.
I mean, let's be honest, even if there was, there's... okay.
But he's not actively writing for the show anymore, though. That's the thing, too, right? Like, he hasn't been writing for the show since, probably the early 2000s?
Something like that. But here it is, politics. Groening has made a number of campaign contributions, all towards Democratic Party candidates and organizations. He has donated money to the unsuccessful presidential campaigns of Democratic candidates Al Gore and John Kerry, as well as previously donated to Kerry's Massachusetts senator campaign. He also collectively donated to the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee and to the Senate campaigns of a lot of people, Hillary Clinton being one. But that was, let's see here. Yeah, that's like the only known one. Like,
I feel like that's to be expected, though, right? If you're a showrunner, a writer, a producer living in Hollywood, you probably live with a certain dogma. It's kind of assumed that you're going to vote and pay a certain way, Like, if you do the other way, you're definitely the black sheep.
So, funny story.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, so have you noticed in Futurama how there's a bunch of Richard Nixon jokes?
Yeah, the head of Richard Nixon lives in one of the bottles.
It actually says Groening has a great disdain towards former President Richard Nixon and enjoyed ridiculing him by making him the butt of the jokes in The Simpsons and Futurama.
That makes sense. No, yeah, I always loved they had the Hall of Presidents, but it was all of them in their the goo jars or whatever kept them alive.
But no, it says his first cousin was a member of the Oregon State Senate. So, he's got connections, obviously as far as politically and obviously just having those conversations with those people. But there's nothing that shows like he had insider, not that we know of anyways, and they're not going to list it on there even if he did have insider information based on certain things. But
yeah, and I was looking, like he hasn't even been a showrunner since season 2. So, I'm sure he's definitely had an influence, but I'm almost wondering, thinking more towards, so if we're going to stick with I'm going to stick with my rabbit hole of the theory that it's predictive programming in a sense. I wonder if it would be a similar setup to how Twitter and Facebook, especially Twitter, pre-Elon Musk acquisition, and we learned through the Twitter files that the FBI did have agents working within Twitter. So that way, if there was a call to say, hey, we need to suppress something, we need to make something disappear, they're the ones that make the call on that. Point in case, I mean, I don't know if you remember when like the news originally broke on the Hunter Biden laptop with the New York Post article.
Oh, yeah.
And Twitter and Facebook notoriously made those posts disappear or made the links unclickable. And they even, at the time, banned the New York Post, which I think was like the second oldest newspaper.
Oh,
And it was either the state of New York or the country. I forget which. But so we know social networks have 3-letter agency administration within it. So who's not to say certain television programs do as well? Or Hollywood production studios?
I mean, to me, it would make sense, honestly, just because, like, when you see, I mean, obviously, celebrities, they say they're not going to go public about their opinions.
Oh, they do all the time, though.
But they do it all the time.
All the time.
And so that wouldn't surprise me that, obviously, they have their connections with who they have their connections with because they give them millions or billions of dollars, whatever, they like, endorsing whoever. So they obviously have their connections somewhere. It's just not on a level that, according to them, us, small people can't fathom. Because let's be honest, like, I know celebrities say that they, appreciate their fans, but they just appreciate what what the fans can do for them. And so I feel like at some point there's a certain level of status that you reach where you have a certain level of control over what's put in front of you and what's not. And algorithms are a part in that. What people don't realize is, like, when you're browsing on a website and you accept the cookies that are on that website, and then you're browsing on social media and you see an ad pop up for a website that you were just on, guess what? That's because you allowed your computer to read what it is that you were doing to carry over into something else. So people can definitely hide what they want to hide and block what they want to block.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are very naive to how much is being tracked. I had this thought recently, and we'll get back to the Simpsons here in a second, but so I bought a new lawnmower recently, right? It's a nice electric lawnmower. I've always had gas-powered ones. Just want an electric one. It's quieter. It's easier to mow when you got neighbors, things like that. But one thing I went down a rabbit hole, and I was like, you know what? There's really not that many brands that make all electric lawnmowers. And it makes sense, not because of the electric lawnmower itself. It's you have to worry about making the batteries, keeping that supply chain up and running, etc. But if you look at it, the vast majority of the electric lawnmowers companies are all Chinese companies. So that's one thing, right? But one thing we do know is most electronic devices that we have in our lives have a connection to the internet. And if something has a connection to the internet, data can be tracked, harvested, and analyzed from that device. And so I had the thought of, okay, so I have this electric lawnmower. That's taking data of my lawn. It knows the size of my lawn. It knows when I'll mow, things like that, right? Other easy things, cell phone. Your cell phone's tracking you out the wazoo. You've sold your soul to either Google or Apple because BlackBerry nor Windows phones exist anymore. So that's a thing that's tracking everything, right? Mm-hmm. Your car. All new cars have a smart feature about them. So the car's tracking you where you go. It knows when you park, where you go to work, things like that. Stuff that your phone may not be picking up on, but the car will pick up on that. Let's go a step further here. Maybe you have a electric vacuum. Maybe you have like a Roomba or an iRobot that's tracking the floor plan of your home and sending it back to the company that manufactures that device. Let's go a step further. Let's say you have a smart thermostat that's tracking the temperature, the preference of the temperature, of the rooms throughout your house. It's tracking your energy consumption from an HVAC perspective. Now, a lot of people are getting on the big kicks of air purifiers or air quality measurement devices. Those are also hooked up to Wi-Fi. So, and there's so many other devices I could throw out as an example. Alexa, yes. Google Home, things like that. Any smartwatches you may have on. So basically, if all that data gets aggregated, a company knows your entire existence more so than you're probably even aware of. That was a long tangent going all the way back to when you mentioned when you click accept terms and conditions when you visit a website, those cookies will track you around for the rest of the next 60 or 90 days, whatever the life cycle is on those. How do we circle back to the Simpsons here? I have another example. They predicted the Apple Vision Pro.
So, I was actually about to bring that one up. Like, I saw that one, and that happened in 2016. Now, let's actually see. Let's see.
Yeah, that was Friends and Family, season 28, episode 2. One of the new predictions from The Simpsons happens to be among the most uncanny. In the 2016 episode, Friends and Family, Mr. Burns hires the Simpsons to become his virtual family. At the end of the episode, during a flash forward into the not-so-distant future, the entire town of Springfield is seen wearing the VR headsets Mr. Burns and the Simpsons were using. Now, earlier this year, or really last year, this article still thinks it's 2023, Apple, of course, released its VR headset, the Apple Vision Pro.
February 2nd of 2024.
Is that when they released the
That's when it actually, the first customer walks out of the Apple store with his purchase of the Vision Pro headset in New York on February 2nd, 2024.
So that really was this year. Dang. Okay.
Yeah. And so 8 years difference. Now, you're not going and again, I hate being a tinfoil hat person to an extent, especially when it comes to stuff like this. Now, other stuff where I'm like, okay, I get it. You can't tell me that a person who just writes cartoons is going to write a cartoon about something that didn't even exist. It like, there was no first appearance. Like, there was nothing that came out about this on anything. So nobody knew anything about it. I mean, you had the Oculus, but I don't even think the Oculus came out until, 20...
Something like that.
Yeah.
I can freak you out a little bit more if you want. So if we go over to Futurama, created by the same showrunner, Matt, I don't know if you ever saw the episode where they had the iPhone. Instead of the I, it's EYE for iPhone, where it's a brain chip. So the whole joke is they walk into like an Apple store and the new iPhone comes out. So of course there's like lines. Everyone's lining up to get their new one. But it's literally a thing where they hammer it into your eardrum and it pops into your brain. And it's like the iPhone because it comes out through your eyes. Tell me that's not Neuralink.
That's pretty close to Neuralink.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, I didn't even know about that one.
Yeah. There's also another one from The Simpsons. I'm looking at this list where they predicted the legalization of marijuana in the country of Canada.
Yeah.
Or Canada, depending on how you pronounce it. But
I'm looking at that one right now.
Yeah, they predicted that in 2005. I remember, I think Canada legalized it in 2018, 2017. I remember when stocks were going crazy because of that. I think it was 2018. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say there's one where they predicted Siegfried and Roy's tiger attack. They predicted that one because I don't even know. I don't remember the year that happened, but they predicted that. Pretty sure they had one for the Tiger King too, didn't they?
Maybe. Wouldn't surprise me. I'm looking at one right now where they predicted murder hornets in 1993. Those are those hornets that I think they came in from China. They were from East Asia, if I remember correctly, up through, I think they came in the Pacific Northwest originally, but they were like killing bees. There was like these wasp hornets that were killing bees. Well, they predicted that in 1993.
And they always existed, but the fact that they predicted like the events that were happening during like 2020 and 2021, so like that to me is like, how does someone know? Like, I mean, obviously you'd have to know that they exist, but it's like, how could you just make an episode saying like, this is exactly how they're going to get here, this is the path they're going to take, this is what they're going to do, and this is how people are going to react? Like, realistically, it's like there's so much that's that's shown in these episodes and these shows that it blows my mind that people, and I get it, there are some people out there who don't think like others. Everyone thinks differently, but I don't know. There's just so much out there that they have shown to predict that you can't tell me otherwise that this isn't the case, you know.
In 1995, they predicted FaceTime because Lisa dialed Marge on a rotary phone that had FaceTime built into it. But this was also 1995, so like this is pre-iPhone, pre-smartphone. I think they might have had the Palm Pilot, but that was still like a black and white screen. There was nothing fancy about that.
Oh, yeah.
You saw those Nokia brick phones where you could throw them on a wall, play Snake. It's good times. It's good times.
Yeah.
Back when
Great
you had a
times.
paid text message.
Yeah, simple times. Simpler times,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, here's a wild one. I didn't catch this the first time looking at it. Walt Disney and Fox merger. They predicted that one, which actually directly impacts them. That was in 1998.
And this is what kind of brings me back to like my statement that I made earlier talking about that maybe they make these episodes and then it just kind of influences like people to like, you know, obviously the higher status people where they're like, we could actually do that. And then they do it just to show like, hey, like we're proving you right or something. I don't know. Like that's just kind of where that comes into play. Like, what if they made this episode and then, you know, was it 20 years later or something like that? They're like, hey, we're going to buy you now. And so that's just kind of how that happened.
It could also be a scenario too where it's like when you put an idea out there, that means the idea could come to fruition. It's not necessarily saying it will, but if the idea wasn't there to begin with, does it even exist to happen? That's maybe a very philosophical idea. You know, it's not manifesting. It's something different than that, but...
Yeah. There's one right here, Faulty Voter Machines.
Yeah.
Season 20, episode 4. That one was linked. Let's see here. 2012 was when the first time it happened, but it doesn't say when, like what year the episode came out, but they showed it based, I think, on the 2008 election and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's definitely very interesting on that front. So,
yeah, it still baffles me how, like, I think my official stance on this topic is, I think The Simpsons, they put out so much content and they're so aware of the zeitgeist of American culture, similar to South Park, where they're so on top of it with just knowing what's popular and what's not at the time they're producing content, that sometimes they do nail it. And then other times it's not bad. It just kind of goes on and people forget about it. Like there's so many episodes, like I don't think I could name you more than 20 Simpsons episodes, but I know I've watched more than 20, you know?
Oh, yeah.
There's just so much content out there that they produce, but it's eerily eerie when you do see the scenes like the Trump escalator scene declaring for presidency, or the Apple Vision Pro, or things like that, where it's like, okay, like someone knew something here. And even if it wasn't like insider knowledge, it's just like they had the creativity to know that this could become the reality at some point.
Yeah. And that's kind of where that gets tricky at, because it's like, in certain cases, yes, though, but it's like, how creative do you have to be to just actually have, because realistically, I mean, out of all 700, more than 700 episodes they've got now, how many episodes actually did, you know, depict something that has currently happened in our time period? But at the same time, it's like, if you make an episode 20 years prior to that event happening, you're telling me that you're just like, you woke up one day and you're like, I'm going to write this episode talking about this exact thing that's currently happening, you know, or that is going to happen at this point in time. Like, that's kind of where it gets tricky to me, because it's like, you don't want to come out as a conspiracy theorist talking about it, but also you're just like, how can you ignore that?
So going back to what you just mentioned about waking up with the idea to write that episode, where do you go when you sleep?
Where do I go when I sleep?
Yeah, where do you go?
I go into dreamland. Sometimes I don't even dream. I just fade to black and then I wake up. So,
What's going on there?
well, I mean, that is true. Because you know what's funny is, like, I actually don't think I even dream anymore. Growing up as a kid, you know, like, you used to go to sleep and you used to have dreams, and now you just go to sleep and it's all dark and then you just wake up.
I'm aware of what you're in reference to. There are times, though, when there are vivid dreams, yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, I just don't. I just don't have them anymore. So, like, I honestly, I don't know. Like, I don't know where I go. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah. So when you wake up with an idea to write a new Simpsons episode, where'd that idea come from?
That's actually a very, very good point. And like I said, I mean, that just kind of really makes you think about stuff based on what they do. Because I mean, there's plenty of episodes. I mean, this is like a list of like 50 episodes or something that they predict. And I mean, that's only 50, but
And those are only the ones that someone has identified what that connection is, too.
here's one. September 11th, 2001 will happen. This episode was wrote in 1997, Season 9, Episode 1, The City of New York versus Homer Simpson. A coupon for a $9 New York bus features the Twin Towers in the background, making the ad appear to read New York $9.11, spawning many September 11th related conspiracies.
Oh, that's wild. I see exactly what you're talking about here. Ah, that's weird. Yeah, the New York Post has something. Well, there's a lot of websites that have something on it. Predicting 9/11 was an insane coinkydink, says the Simpsons showrunner. Sure he does. Sure he does. Says one of the original writers for The Simpsons has revealed why he believes the show has such an uncanny ability to accurately guess the future. Indeed, in its over 30 years on air, the animated Nostradamus has been credited with predicting everything from Roy Horn being mauled by a tiger to fish having 3 eyes, Apple's keyboards having a glitch, the big Game of Thrones surprise ending, and European beef being contaminated with horse meat, and perhaps most famously, the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks. The showrunner of The Simpsons, Al Jean, who has been writing for the show since it premiered in 1989, believes the trick to its correct truth or future telling is both luck and the sheer quality of episodes produced. This article goes on for a while, but is it a coincidence? Is it more than a coincidence? That is interesting though, because it has like the $9 with the Twin Towers. Huh.
Yeah. And they've got like other like smaller ones. I didn't even know about this one, but the near final Game of Thrones episode will end like this. And there's an episode where there's a dragon that burns down a village. And for those of you who haven't watched, if you haven't watched Game of Thrones, what are you doing with your life, first of all? Because Game of Thrones is an amazing show. Being completely honest, so they could have taken more time on that final season and actually, wrote it out and made it better. But they rushed it. Here, this is where we're at.
I think the writers got a little too much ahead of themselves because was it the last season or was it more than just the last season where they were completely flying blind because the books hadn't even been written yet, right? Like George R.R. Martin hadn't even written the books. Like he's still actively writing the canon version of Game of Thrones.
But I'm pretty sure he finished the Song of Ice and Fire though, because the Song of Ice and Fire is what Game of Thrones is based off of. Now, the new series House of the Dragon that's on HBO Max, we haven't watched that yet, but it's I think he's still writing that. But yeah, no, as far as Game of Thrones goes, though, I mean they did a disservice to their fan base, and I was very disheartened, even though I came into the game very, very late. I was very disheartened by how quick that season went and how everything played out onto that. But
yeah, so apparently the final seasons of Game of Thrones were filmed without the use of the books. The show's creators and HBO decided to deviate from the books and make their own choices about the story to keep the story moving forward and create a satisfying conclusion, which I feel they did the exact opposite of what they intended to.
If they could have literally followed events that had happened in Because I get it. You don't want to make something like, you don't want to make a show and then he writes the book and then it's completely different. But you could have collaborated with the man and been like, hey, like, what do you think about this ending? Or maybe he had a different ending in mind. Or like you could have gotten the notes from him as to what he was planning on writing in the book.
Yes.
And then made episodes based off of that. But no, as most creators do, they decided to create something on their own fruition. I don't want to get off on a tangent on that. Let's go back the other direction because I have my opinions about that. But either way, though, as far as The Simpsons goes, there is definitely a lot of interesting facts about how they portray stuff, especially like, and again, like if there's certain things that happen, like let's just say a month or two out from when the episode launches, that's one thing. But when you have something that happens like years after an episode comes out that depicts and it has there's there's obviously the animated evidence that shows like, hey, this is what happened. You got to look at it here in some shape or fashion.
Maybe I have the ultimate example to kind of wrap this thing up for everybody here. The Simpsons movie. So not an episode, but that full-length movie. They had a story plot in there where the NSA was surveilling and spying on everybody. I don't know if you remember that from the movie. The movie came out in 2007. I don't know if you remember a gentleman by the name of Edward Snowden, but he had the big leak whistleblower with WikiLeaks, proving that the NSA was factually spying on everybody. Edward Snowden is still on the run. I think he was in Russia. I forget where he's at currently today, but he's always been around Europe because he's trying to, basically he doesn't want to be tried and basically locked up or killed in the U.S. But he didn't publish those documents until 2013. So the whole concept of like, yeah, we know the NSA spying on us. We didn't know that for sure until 2013. And that was because of a whistleblower named Edward Snowden. The Simpsons had that in 2007. In the movie, Riley is practically searching right now.
I'm about to go on a list for just looking this up, probably.
No, you're good. Everyone's on a list.
That's true, because the NSA is tracking us, correct?
Yeah, they're listening right now. We haven't even published the episode yet, and they already know everything we're saying, because there's probably a bug because we have Windows computers. It's on there. It's tracked us.
And because they've probably listened to our previous episodes, and you're like, oh, we got to listen to these guys. But yeah, Russia later granted Snowden the right of asylum with an initial visa for residence for 1 year, which was subsequently repeatedly extended. In October 2020, he was granted permanent residency in Russia. In September 2022, Snowden was granted Russian citizenship by President Vladimir Putin. Now, I'm about to go down on a rabbit hole on this. What if he granted him asylum and granted him citizenship because he knew things about our country that we don't know about, and so he has secrets that he's giving to Vladimir Putin, that, which, let's be honest here, all the governmental powers of the world probably all know about what's going on with each other. They just make it seem like they don't so that they can keep us in the non-knowing. But that's he's still alive. He's still out there.
Yeah, no, he's for sure still out there. I think I'm only go out there and say I don't think he's really telling the Russian government anything. I think what it really is, in my opinion, is whenever he provided those documents to WikiLeaks to publish, it was very embarrassing for the national security apparatus, like, for lack of a better term, the deep state, whatever you want to call it. It was very embarrassing because it really put there out in the public that the United States government was spying on its own people en masse, blanketly, like no mercy. And I don't think they liked being put on blast like that. And I think they wanted to make an example of Edward by basically locking him up forever. I don't think they were going to kill him. I think they were just like lock him up, quiet him down forever. But
they would definitely quiet him forever, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I think Vladimir Putin in Russia realizes that as long as Edward Snowden is alive and the memory of what Edward did is still relevant, it's very embarrassing to his rivals. And so I think he's using Edward as like a chess piece, where as long as Edward's safe and alive, like you and I are talking about Edward Snowden right now, right? Someone out there may be listening and who has no idea who Edward Snowden is and may not know, like, oh, snap, like our government's spying on us. Like, yeah, like we think everyone knows that, but not everyone really knows that, you know? A lot of people are very ignorant, or, you know, ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah.
So I think the longer he's kept safe, whether it be in Russia, Croatia, Zimbabwe, wherever it is, the cause is still alive to figure out what dirty deeds our government's doing and make it come to light.
But the thing is, though, is like if that was one of the few things that kind of set a lot of this other stuff in motion, the U.S. government has definitely done a great job at concealing a lot of these things.
For sure. Just look at anyone who's ever been related with Bill or Hillary Clinton. There's a big list of names of people who just conveniently killed themselves.
Yep. And so it is what it is. But no, overall though, if for those of you out there who have never seen The Simpsons, give it a watch. If you don't want to watch the whole entire thing, but you want to watch specific episodes and do your research, just Google the times that The Simpsons has predicted the future, and it will tell you specifically which episodes to watch. And it will tell you, just kind of where everything is at on that. But I definitely think that, there's more here than what meets the eye as far as, some content creators and some cartoon drawers and artists,
And with that, we have our company policy. If you made it to this part of the episode, do what Riley just said. Leave us a comment, a reply, feedback. Let us know. First of all, do you even think The Simpsons are telling the future? What's your take on that? And as a fallback, what's your favorite Simpsons episode? Let us know. You got any closing words other than that?
No. I hope you enjoy The Simpsons.
I was about to say Yabba Dabba Doo, but that's definitely a different program.